All right, on this episode, we are speaking with Susie Ippolito from the startup community. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this discussion.
Love it. I always enjoy discussions with you, so it feels fitting that we
Same.
threw it into a podcast as well.
About time.
Perfect, right? Awesome. So take me through, or take the audience through, people that are listening, what it is that you're building.
Sure. So I am in the process of building the startup community, which is a community that supports startups on their journey to their first $1 million in sales. We are on a mission to provide the resources and the education and the support that they need to get them to make significant progress in their business every year until they reach that goal. So far, it's going very well. We're in growth mode, and proper pricing strategy is a big part of that.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, I think as someone who's in the bucket of people who fits into like what it is that you offer, I can say like, and I'm sure people listening would agree, it's really hard to find good community, supportive community, especially when there's a couple different areas where this shows up. It's like LinkedIn groups, not really. There's kind of Reddit communities, but they're kind of wild and everyone's anonymous, so it can kind of be a little bit weird. And then the unfortunate thing with like, a school or a Facebook or these types of groups, it's like depending on the caliber of person that you get in, I find a lot of the groups that I'm up in, I wouldn't say part of, but I'm like physically in them. It's like it's spam, it's
Mm,
people trying to farm business from overseas. It's like your DMs getting flooded every time you say, "Hey, I have this opportunity," and it's just a bunch of low caliber opportunities
yeah.
coming in. So, tell me a little bit about how you're, managing that process, because community is tough.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And there's so many bad communities out there that are just unintentional, or they're just not run in a very way where there's an active admin filtering these things. And they can be very, very big, and you can be one voice in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, and comments get into the hundreds, which is wonderful in terms of engagement. But where is the entrepreneur's voice really in those hundreds of comments? How much opportunity is really there for them? So I've always been a person with pretty high standards, and so I want to transfer that over to the startup community. And so we're pretty particular about the types of startups that this is appropriate for. We have a small segment of very early stage startups. These are people with beginning business ideas, or they're first entering entrepreneurship. That's our smallest segment. Our largest segment are works in progress. These are people who have been in business for a little while, probably generating in the high fives or early sixes, or even into the mid six figures. And then we have a segment of experts who are there, who are very kindly, like yourself, provide a lot of advice and expertise to support that journey. And we have just really being very specific about who this is for, and then really having backups for people who it's not appropriate for. So it's not just a hard no of like, no, this isn't for you, but maybe that this person you should follow, or maybe go down this path, and then when you're ready, you come in. Yeah, but
Yeah.
um, and that speaks to pricing, because how do you price it to avoid the spammers? How do you price it to avoid people who aren't going to really be there for the benefit of others?
Yeah. I always love, for me, that layer of payment in this type of ecosystem is so incredibly powerful. And, I've seen, things where it's like, oh, it's $100 for the year to be a part of this thing. Now, obviously, that's not as big of a filter as like 500 or $1,000 a year for the thing, but I will say that like even as low as $50, uh, it's something where there's just a bunch of people that will not open their wallet or cannot open their wallet at that rate, and it's like if you're trying to level up, if you're trying to, learn and contribute to an ecosystem that's mutually beneficial, like if you can't afford a couple $100s for a year to jump into something, it's like you're right. It is more of that, like, where is that startup version of it? Maybe it's joining someone's email list who you can leverage their expertise or whatever it is. But if you can't pay $200, there's no way you're going to be investing thousands of dollars to make impact and real growth in your business.
Exactly. Yeah. Price does provide an excellent barrier of entry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So on that subject, like let's talk pricing for your thing. How are you thinking about the structure of it? Is it a monthly thing? Is it an annual thing? Like where does the business model go in your mind?
Sure. So this is probably the thing I've gotten the most unsolicited advice about is how I should be pricing this. And it's all like good advice that I've gotten. It's not bad advice, but well, two things about advice. It's hard to give unless you really know the context of the business model and the goals. And then and there's it's you just don't have the full picture, of what we're really trying to do here. And what works for one model doesn't necessarily work for the other model. So what we decided to do, because I'm also committed to making it affordable for two things. I'm committed to making it affordable for the segments that we serve, while being a little bit of a reach, because I want it to be something that you're aware that you've invested in. And so if you've paid, $20 for something, how much are you going to go back to it? But if you pay a couple of hundred, you might be more likely to participate. So we're at $299 for a year and $29 for a month, but a minimum of 3 months, because I felt like that created a barrier of entry and would like kind of get just more of a commitment and buy-in on their end, and we'd probably just avoid a lot of scammers and spammers. Not all of them, but probably avoid most of them. I felt like that was a comfortable price point where it would keep the riffraff out and up level who comes in. I do also see pricing as a test. So I see it as something I'm very prepared to play with and try it this way and try it this way. Not extremes, but just to see like what is the price point that is actually that this is actually creating the right amount of value to align with.
Yeah.
And I want them to feel like they're getting a lot more than they paid for. I like to over deliver and make it feel like, wow, I'm getting this for only this amount.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we will dive into that. I'm gonna give a shout out. Actually, my aunt Norma. I'll never forget it. It was about 3 years into my agency, and I was explaining all the things that we do, and we were having dinner. It was approximately a 4.5 hour dinner, and she goes, "Well, what is this digital marketing thing? How does it work? I need to understand all of it." She's that person. She likes to dive in and really know. And what it came down to, and I said, well, we do all this and we create this outcome, and then this is our price. And she sat for a moment, and then she frowned, like just this pure look of disappointment. And she goes, Michael, if you want to be Bill Gates, be a philanthropist, sorry, go make the money first and then give it away. But right now, you don't have the option. That's not how this is going to work. And I'll never forget like the way that, and what I did actually 2 days later is I remember paying about $1,000 for a 45-minute call with a pricing coach. Kind of a useless call. It was not a great investment, but it was like, okay, I got to expand my mind and think about it. But one thing that like really landed that is really relevant, and I see this mistake that a lot of people make, it's like we need to work backwards from what the business needs to survive and what the business needs to thrive financially. And so that's my first question to you. It's like, if this is, hey, this is a side project, if it's making me, X amount a month, I'm happy, versus I actually want this to be my full-time endeavor. I want to create this thing. I want this to be my primary source. Then it's a different number. And so like what do you need from the business, regardless of what you can get from people? Like what do you need from the business to make you motivated? Because there's a couple pieces, right? If you're not making enough to stay motivated in it, you're not going to stay in it. If you're not making enough for it to support your life and it has to be your primary source, you're going to say, well, I can make more money somewhere else. I'm out. And so it's always separating the what you want to be able to give from like, what does the business need to thrive on, you know?
Yeah, and that's probably like my pricing Achilles heel in a nutshell. It's probably what I never think about. I always think about, creating value for the other person, delivering beyond their expectations, and yeah, really just creating value for the user. I don't
Yeah.
really think about what the business truly needs. And my goals, as I've written them out so far, are really in terms of member numbers, not even in terms of uh, financial growth. But as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, because I'm remembering, because I couldn't really figure out how do I project how many annual members I'll get and how many monthly members I'll get. And then is that two different sales goals at that point? And then am I marketing to those two different people differently? So it's, yeah, so that's why I get stuck there.
Yeah.
Um, what does the business need? um, this is my whole focus right now, and because it requires just so much to build at this stage, and it does require my full attention. um, what what like I guess I have to answer the question, I guess. What It's more, the question to me is more, what do I need to be inspired enough to keep this going? Because like I said, it's just an incredible amount of work, and it is not worth it to keep doing it for free. um for me, again, it comes back to the member numbers. I
Yeah.
want, yeah, but
So and
then
here's the throttle, right? I want to create this exclusive thing that's going to really specifically be of value and help, which means that I don't want 20,000 people. So I think it's, let's think through, like, what size does a group need to be in your mind, because you've worked inside of brands that have had
oh yeah.
communities of various sizes, and you can see the pros and the cons of all the different scenarios. So in your mind, when you close your eyes and say, this group is 5,000 people, 10,000 people, 300 people, like, what is that number? How does that land with you? What's the number that comes to your mind?
Keeping it intimate is important. um this is such a hard thing to project in communities, but for right now, I would like to keep it at under 500, let it adjust and recalibrate, and then see where it goes from there. I'm not going to
Right.
be happy. The communities that have hundreds of thousands of members get 200 comments, but think about what that's a very, very tiny engagement rate. With
Yep.
130 members, we have almost 100% engagement on a daily basis. And that's just phenomenal that people are either tuned in to what's happening there, even if they're not commenting, they're at least looking at the community every single day, almost 100% of them.
Yeah.
So that's more important to me. So it's a case of growing slowly. So the goal is to have 100 members, 100 paid members by May 14th, and then 250 paid members by September 1st.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of readjusting, recalibrating. I meet with almost every single member. If I can, I'll meet with any one of them that I can. So
Yep.
then there's that whole period of onboarding. It's making sure that there's a personalized, high touched onboarding experience when we do that. So that's why
Yep.
the pushes are kind of probably sound a lot smaller than they should be, but it aligns with our goal to develop with intention.
Yeah. And so as I'm hearing that, and I just for the people that are watching, I'm looking down at my phone. So the 250 members, right, at that current price puts it at 75K in revenue for the year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the big question. That is the question that needs to be answered, is like, with that, with the energy that needs to go in, with your, lifestyle, with your um need to probably bring on some level of support, whether it's, we were talking the other day about, like, getting help with maybe some admin stuff, maybe some graphic stuff, so that you're not doing the things that are outside of your zone of genius for long. Sometimes in the beginning we got to do it, but the sooner we can get the sooner we can get rid of that, the better. But if we're talking about 250 members at that price, we're talking about 75K a year. And then over the course of the next year, so those people stay on, it maxes out to the 500 minus the current active members. Now we're talking about 111,000 gross for all the paying members at that price. So, I mean, I think if you think about that number, then it becomes a question for you of like, is that a number where that makes sense? And if not, you either need to increase the number of members, increase the price, or find other revenue opportunities within the ecosystem.
That's what we're going for.
The third
Yes.
one?
The third one. That's what we're
Yeah.
going for. It is, what the best thing you can do when you have a business idea like this is have lunch with your lawyer, right? And that was one of the first things that he said. When you set something up like this, it's a media company, and it is, or it's being. That's what we're going for. So there are multiple revenue streams. We have some small affiliate deals right now, trying to think of creative ways to work them into the content without it feeling like an ad heavy, situation. Um, but yeah, we're going for multiple streams of revenue.
Got it. And one thing that one thing that pops out in my mind, just because it's a conversation I've been having with a potential partner, you're in the ecosystem, and there is this level of giving that people are willing to do. Like I've seen the comments, I've seen the threads, I see the workshops. Like we're gonna do a workshop on like kind of Q&A for marketing and strategy. So there's a lot of value being given at the front end. One thing that sticks out in my mind is like, what are the digital products or opportunities within the group of like, I think about even just because that was what's on my mind. I've got this course that's like how to get booked on podcasts, right? And it's like
Mhm.
step by step. It's how I get all my podcast appearances. And I do think for you, it's like, hey, Mike or other people that have this type of content, I'd love to push people to it, make sure that I get X amount per sale. And creating those. I mean, obviously, on something that's more of a software where it's a recurring, where you can make money month
Mhm.
over month, is obviously stronger than a one-off program. But yeah, I do see like,
Mhm.
and you almost own all the relationships of the people that you would want to do that with because they're
Yeah.
there, they're in the party with us, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. And then what I love about that strategy is that it gives the works in progress segment something to aspire to. So I want them to see successful entrepreneurs making money in creative ways so that they then want to emulate that behavior and say, hey, how do I get up to that point where I can sell my stuff in here? And then we can, nurture them through the programming to get them to the point where they can, present or, take over the feed for the day or somehow share their knowledge.
yeah.
So I like how that very much aligns with our values.
Yeah. One thing I'll say, as a former member of the trends community,
Mhm.
right? Where it was like, for anyone who doesn't know it, it was these publications that were written by data scientists on like what was trending, what was going on in industry, and it was kind of how do you take that information and potentially turn it into business opportunities. So
Mhm.
most of the people that I met through that group, including yourself and a number of people I stay in touch with to this day, one thing that we always discussed was like, I know that they're spending all this money making these newsletters every week. I hadn't read a newsletter in a year and a half. I was there for the Facebook group because it was curated and there was that payment threshold that was in there. And so, I think your pricing is right on point. Um, when it comes to that, because yes, if I was scanning through and there was one subject that kind of came up in one of the emails, I might skim through it, but I don't think I read a full email in probably the last year and a half that I was part of that group, because it was just information overload. Like it just gave me shiny object syndrome. It just made me want to, like, if I was, new and thinking about what to start, it would have been nice. But as someone who's running a business, like I don't need the distraction of like, oh, here's a bunch of opportunities that you're not taking advantage of. Like you're just going to drive my attention into the ground. So I actually just completely stopped reading them. And I know a lot of people in the group did the same, and we were only there because of the caliber of conversation and the people that we were
Yeah.
communicating with, and it was in and around that price as well. So I think that's an
Oh yeah.
easy layup price for you to run with 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it is. Yeah, I think so too. I think it does demonstrate a lot of value. You did get a lot of bang for your buck at Trends. The 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 data, the surveys that were done showed that people, it was like almost divided. People who were devoted to the newsletter and people who were devoted to the group. So, but it is a value add, for people who do want both. And but yeah, I lost my place.
Yeah. And here's the truth at that price point. Like I think about, okay, what are the comparatives that I'm spending that much money on? So, and what
Mhm.
is the like what is the output? What is the value? So when I look at group, there's like these you can pay to go on to like virtual co-working where you're just like in a Zoom room with some
Mhm.
people, whatever, like that's coming in at half the price. And that's like, you're not building community, you're not getting any education. That's just like, I just need to not be distracted for the next 2 hours. So I'm going to go into a Zoom room where I feel like I have to be working and I have pressure on me. Like, that's $150 for the year, right? So like, I think where you are coming in with where you've got programming, where you've got caliber of people, and bigger than that, people just are lonely building their like. We're all building internet
Yeah.
things these days, and like,
Mhm.
it's pretty lonely. And like when I go to a Facebook group and I post like, oh, I'd love, hey, I'd love some feedback on this, or I'd love some whatever, and like 15 of the comments are to these like whatever the not Discord, that other online thing, like, oh, join this channel, and it's like, oh, this is clearly a crypto scam, and there's nobody
Yeah.
monitoring it, and there's no quality control. It makes me
Yeah.
just not want to have conversations with anyone there. And there are some gems. I met some amazing people in these groups, but like these unmonitored, unqualified groups, it's kind of exhausting. I'm not a big fan of them, and so
They
you
are.
know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You the I feel like you're rewriting my landing page, first of all. So thank you for that too. A lot of these points, do need to be on there, really about how special and intentional it is. That's the word that I get a lot about it from people who are in the community business. Uh, and it's okay to sell littler things. I'm very aware of doing things that you're in the business of doing. And I don't know that I'm in the business of selling like $150 one-on-one or these collaborative working things. But there are probably other ways, or it would have to be more established, like because you want to be in the startup community co-working group, like that's I do your co-working sessions because I like being in Mike's co-working session. There's a little there's just you're associated with it. So it's I know it's going to be productive. I know it's going to be there's going to be cool people in the room. I know that I'm going to learn something, and I know that I'm going to get a lot done, and it's going to feel really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know that we're no. So I think once you're known for more things, you can add things like that in.
Yeah.
But I see your point about adding more value adds in.
Yeah, and it's like I think oftentimes what we do is we discount, right? We discount ourselves, we discount the offer, and we say, okay, I'm going to add more bullets, more deliverables, more items to the product so that when someone sees the price, they're like, whoa, there's these like 35, 40 things. I actually just wrote a piece about this where it's like everybody that's selling ChatGPT prompts right now, their advertisements are like, get the 70,000 GPT prompts. And it's like, for what? Like, that feels like a lot of work. If you came to
Yeah,
me and said, hey, people in our community experience this, like they come and they feel like, when they join our co-working things, they feel like they get a week's worth of work done in a day. Like, if I got a week's worth of work done in one afternoon, do you know how much money that is for me? Like, I for
yeah,
$300, and I get to do that a couple times a month. Are you crazy? Like, that's amazing, right? Then it's like, also, hey, come learn from people who are, at this revenue level. They're not in the $100 million companies. They're two steps ahead of you, and you can come and like pick their brain and you could brush shoulders with them. Like, when else would you have access to people like this, right? And it's
yeah,
like, oh wow, you're right. And so I think it's less number of deliverables and more like, really leaning into the value and the value within the value. Like, how does that stack up? And I think just offering a few little things, but expressing them in a way that like, you know how it feels to be over here. I'm giving you this output, and it's going to be, it's got to be a no brainer at 300 bucks a year. So I think that's what it is. As I'm thinking about, we're talking landing page copy, it's like less what the deliverables are, less these are the things, and more here's the outcome you will achieve with these things. And I know you're great at copy, but sometimes when we write our own copy, and I've got this
Oh,
experience
the
as well,
worst.
we want to overthink it. We always try and outsmart ourselves. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
about, taking that step back of like, if I was on a call with someone and I was like, hey, you could have these three outcomes for 300 bucks, it'd be like, oh, I mean, yeah, obviously, let's do that. And so it's
Yeah.
like, how do we express that to make it the no-brainer? But you've got the experience with copy, and you've got the experience with community. So I think it's gonna accelerate very quickly for you.
I hope so. I hope so. I need that motivation to keep going, that's for sure. Um, so pricing, I've heard somebody, I'm not doing the let everybody in for a dollar. That just doesn't create a barrier enough. That I've heard a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are your thoughts on the structure right now that the 3 month minimum on the monthly, the 299 for the year? So I feel like we feel like that is a great number. There's a lot of value there for that price, which I like. And I'm not opposed to raising it when demand asks for it. Um, but that monthly situation, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't like it only because I was reading a study, there's a number that creates a mental barrier on the monthly, and I think it was either 17 or $18. And I think it's why Netflix keeps it under the threshold. My former business coach, there was a study that he referenced where it's like there's a number where your brain doesn't like acknowledge it, and it just keep going forever and ever and ever and ever. But then there's multiple different thresholds, but there is a threshold around, I think it's around $18 or $19, where you start to think, oh, is this thing worth it? Because this is like more, and it's not. It's so funny, like $18 versus 17, you wouldn't think it would make a difference, but there is a psychological threshold of um where people consider for their monthly subscriptions. And you see it in the like, these apps that scan all of your monthly whatevers, and like, oh, did you know you have two Netflix subscriptions? Do you know you have like the money saving kind of tools? And so you don't want someone continually thinking, oh, is this 35 bucks worth it because it's over some number that, or whatever, 30 bucks worth it because it's
Yeah.
over some illogical number that they're worried about. I think it's like the one time, I really like the one time payment for the year, where it's like, okay, I've committed to this thing. It's 300 bucks is a little bit of a considered purchase, but not, over 500 is like getting into that territory where it's like, is this worth it? But I think under five for a one transaction is good, and it's not monthly recurring, so it's not constantly being like, hey, make sure you think this is worth it. Hey, make sure you think this is worth it. It just sets you up for the whole year. So I, for this type of thing, I really like the annual pricing instead of the monthly. Um, I understand like the desire to like let some people in the door, give it a little bit of a test drive. But I think if it's somebody who sees the type of people that are there, understands what the thing can do, and don't have the $300 to put up for it, you know, maybe not the right fit. You may consider doing it where you're like full money back guarantee. If you're not happy in the first month, we will refund you, but you have to pay for it up front. Because I think once people get in
Mhm.
and they see it and they're like, oh, okay, I don't need that money back. Like, I think we're fine here. So that's the direction that I would go. Like, hey, test drive it for a month, but pay for it for the
Mhm.
year.
Okay. All right, I like that. There was a whole sort of administrative load that goes with the monthly, which is that you have to follow up with people. You have to make sure that they're happy or see what you can do to make them happy, and then you have to try to convert them, or you have to get them out of the group.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole another task list
Yeah.
that wasn't really appealing to me anyway.
Yeah, I think at $300 or $400 for a year, if you're someone who has to like really hum and haw about like, oh, do I want access to these smart people? Do I want these exclusive workshops? Do I want some productivity sessions? Like, I don't know. If that's like such a big consideration for you, maybe it's not the right fit. you know?
Exactly. Yeah, it almost provides a better barrier of entry than the monthly. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking of it like kind of the opposite way, but it really does. It is a no-brainer. Um, and it yeah. All right. I'll
Like
try
that.
it. I'll try
Yeah,
anything.
my gut goes to it, and then I think it's, how do you market it? How do you get out there? Um, because if you have happy people, having them do the work of sharing it and getting people involved, even if they're happy, is actually a very difficult thing. I've had people buy, $200 courses of mine who are like, this changed the game for me. And I'm like, cool, could you share it on social media? And they're like, yeah, sure. Never happens. Like it's
Yeah.
such a difficult task, but like once you find that formula, you're not talking about a staggering number of people required. So, I don't know. I don't even think you end up needing to go down the route of ads at any point. I think this can be done organically with more visibility coming on to coming on to things like this, and the people that are listening to me being like, oh, Mike's in it, and you know cool. I mean, I think trying to get some customers just through outside visibility. I think you probably land where you need to land, but I think it's a good place to start. One thing, final thing, and then because I know we're kind of at time, but one final thing that I've seen work well. Do you know Chris Do? He's
Yeah,
like
of
a
course.
pretty famous designer. So he has a
Yeah.
program where it's like a monthly group coaching call or weekly group coaching call, and then like basically just a library of material of like, hey, this is
Mhm.
tutorials and different things. He has a thing where it's like after a certain number of people sign up, the price just goes up, and eventually if people drop off, then the lower ticket people drop off, and then so it's like for every I don't know what he does, but it could be something like for every 20 people that join, the price goes up by $25 or $20. And so there's this constant, as people are churning at some point, if they churn, then there's this
Mhm.
constant, like the threshold's higher because we've been building this library of content. We've been really narrowing down the programming. We've been constantly bringing in new and interesting people. Like, I think that's an interesting model where it kind of
Mhm.
keeps moving up the threshold, but because you're building the library of material and whatever other value adds that you're bringing in, it's going to be a more sophisticated, established product, and it should be valued higher. So that's another way to think about it.
Yeah, that is a very sophisticated pricing method. And just so cool. Very Chris Doe thing to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
that's kind of awesome. Well, maybe one day the startup community will achieve something that spectacular. But this has been really changed my thinking in a lot of ways today. I think that there's multiple ways for us to create revenue. I think that especially the conversation we had the other day, where you have me really thinking about multiple ways to spend that marketing budget, because we do have it's a fairly healthy budget that we have, and thinking about creative ways to use it beyond paid ads. And I've thought already about like great things to do that create a lot of different levels of ROI, and different kinds of ROI. But we do have to get, selling to keep growing and support the growth and make it so it creates some satisfaction on my end
Absolutely.
too,
And if
which it does,
and
yeah.
and if someone listening right now is thinking, "Oh man, I got to be a part of this thing. This is exactly the type of community and support and opportunity that I'm looking for," where would they find you?
Oh, go to the startupcommunity.org and fill out an application. You can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to DM me. Any friends of Mike's is a friend of mine.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Great time as always. Thanks for having me.